Hello again. Right, today what we're going to talk about. Today we are talking about difficult conversations. So why am I talking about this? The reason I'm talking about this is because I was a children's social worker for 2 years, although I've left now. And that I think will be a later video as to why I've left. But in that role, you're generally in people's lives that don't really want you there. And it's also probably one of the most publicly hated professions in the sense of when things go wrong, as I think recently happened in Solihull, and the social worker's name was leaked to the press, you'll get death threats, you'll be hated. You're only involved usually when a child's safety is at risk and something really needs to change, otherwise you wouldn't really be involved. So in this role, of course, there were lots and lots of difficult conversations, and I quickly noticed that I struggled with them. And so that was the theme for my master's dissertation research, and I want to talk about in this next series of videos difficult conversations, what they are, how we respond to them, how might we respond to them better based on some of the most difficult conversations that I've had, which of course was in the social work role, around things like domestic abuse, substance misuse, people not feeling able to tell the truth to your face and you knowing about it and how to address that. All of these things that will obviously relate to social work, but also managerial positions in daily life when we talk to friends and family. Difficult conversations are everywhere in our lives, and so that's why I want to do this series of videos. There are different types of difficult conversations, like breaking bad news, challenging somebody on something they've done, or asking someone out even could be deemed a difficult conversation, as often we do shy away from it. And all of these scenarios, could be termed difficult conversations, but they're completely different situations, completely different. And there's no one size fits all for this. But there are some principles that can generally be employed in any of these conversations. I struggled in my social work role initially as I really disliked difficult conversations. I'd really sort of just steer away from them or sort of brush over them quite quickly. I overthought often how I might be coming across to the families that I'm working with, and I had the perceptions of my social work role in the back of my mind. I came from a family where empathy was something that was modelled for me, and so throughout my life I've seen empathy, understanding how other people feel and reacting in that way as a really important thing. But then to have to challenge someone about things that are often really personal, especially in social work, like substance misuse or addiction, I found it really difficult, and I found that I was almost overly compassionate in the sense of that I was thinking about how it might affect them, and I worried about how I would word things and how it would come across, so much so that then you avoid it because you're overthinking about it. And this meant things were left unsaid, which is never good in any situation, but especially in social work. I thought it was an area that I could improve on. I think this is a key point here, is if there are things that you have to do daily, whether at work or at home or with friends or family, whatever it might be, or in your hobbies, and there's an aspect of it that you really struggle with and you really find difficult every day, you have two options really. One, you could leave those situations so that you don't have to address the thing that you really struggle with, or you could try and work on the thing that you're struggling with and try and become better at managing whatever it is that you need to manage. And if you don't work on these things or leave that situation, you're opening yourself up to a life really of unhappiness and challenge. And I'm not saying avoid difficult things. I'm very much a proponent of doing difficult things that build your psychological immune system, so to speak. But if it's a difficult thing that's an area that you're clearly is a weakness, so for example myself, if my work involved me having to use Microsoft Excel for every task I did every day, I'd struggle, and I would work at it and try and get better, but it might be that my mind doesn't match very well to Microsoft Excel and the statistics and the factual basis. I'm very much a creative, words-based type person. So while I could work at that thing, Microsoft Excel, it isn't something that I'm naturally predisposed to enjoy and gives me passion and energy in my life. And so in that situation, you've got two options. You can try and work at it and see if you can get better, which is always a good thing to try and do. But then if it's something that doesn't energize you, leave in that situation to focus on things that you are good at, focus on things that do energize you and you are passionate about, I think is really the way to go. Many books like The Unfair Advantage propound the idea that we should double down on our strengths in order to live a happy and successful life. And I certainly agree with that you should sort of focus on the areas of your strength as I've discussed. And this is where you should focus most of your energy in terms of in your life and with friends and with family and at work. But that's unless one of your weaknesses is holding you back in life in an area that is really important to you. And if that's the case, that issue will keep coming up, that weakness will keep coming up. And if you don't address it and focus on this for a period, then you will likely struggle to better yourself and live a fulfilled life. That's my 2 cents and thoughts anyway. And now I've found myself, after addressing my difficulties with difficult conversations, I've seen myself sort of grow in confidence both when I was at work, in social work, and in my current role, but also at home, more able to talk about things that often were left unsaid and probably should have been said. So it has permeated outside of work as well. But this brings me on to my experience of difficult conversations. I always thought really that I was quite good at them. I always thought that I was good at addressing things that needed to be addressed, but social work was a different world of difficult conversations. My role as a children's social worker, as I say, these types of conversations were just part of the job, part of the day-to-day. And when you're doing those things that you struggle with day-to-day, it really sort of emphasises that you are struggling with them. In other roles, this might not necessarily be the case. Maybe you're in management, for example, and have to be able to address your concerns with workers, but maybe it's not every day, maybe it's every now and again. But within social work, this was a daily thing that you have to do. Ultimately, I knew that difficult conversations was also going to be a key part of my life beyond work as well. And so not addressing this tendency I had to avoid these types of conversations would negatively impact my feelings of fulfillment and my ability to speak up in the future. And I want to be that type of person that in a room where everyone's agreeing with someone and you disagree is able to say, oh no, I disagree because of X, Y or Z, and rather than going along with the group and having that sort of difficult, challenging conversation with people, it's who I want to be. And that's why I think it's so important. I want to be able to say those hard truths that are really important to discuss. And in Atomic Habits, James Clear discusses that thinking about yourself as the person that does these things, that is this person. So, for example, in terms of exercise or your diet, rather than saying, I should do this or I will do this, or you think, I do this, I am this person because that is what a healthy person does. I am a healthy person, and so I wake up early and go to the gym, I eat this type of food, etc. It pushed me to, and the fact that I said to myself, I am the type of person that can discuss these difficult topics. That's who I am as a person, made me really want to address that. During social work, it was difficult because I found myself, whether it be putting off phone calls or not addressing concerns in the depth that they really needed. And one time actually avoiding addressing the smell of alcohol on a dad, which later came to light anyway. I noticed it but then didn't voice it, and reflecting, obviously it's really important, especially in that role, to be able to do that, to be able to say those home truths in a constructive way. And I value openness and honesty in my life, and the families that I worked with, it was so important to them as well, and yet I wasn't modelling that. And so it was difficult because you weren't matching up to who you want to be. But difficult conversations are called difficult for a reason. They aren't easy and they shouldn't be. The nerves before saying a home truth is important because it represents that you're about to say something that will be difficult to hear, and it is important to acknowledge this, but that doesn't mean that they should be avoided. So I've spoken a lot about difficult conversations, but what actually are they? And I think generally we all have an idea of what one might be. Maybe you're thinking about examples that you've had in the past, either at work or at home. Like when you stood up and disagreed with something your boss said, maybe in a meeting, or when you told a friend that you disagreed with something that they believed in, or something that they said. It was a difficult thing to address. Difficult conversations come in all shapes and sizes, and the level of difficulty can massively vary, especially depending on the people you're talking to in the situation. What may be difficult for you might be easy for me, and so it really is dependent on who you are as a person and the situation. But there is a general definition for these types of conversations. Generally, they consist of 1, high stakes, 2, differing opinions, and 3, strong emotions. This is from Macmillan et al. 2002, which I'll link down below if anyone wants to have a bit of a read. Again, yeah, many of this is subjective, but my definition of strong emotions or high stakes may be different to yours, but I think this is a useful understanding of what is and what isn't a difficult conversation and what they often involve. High stakes includes, for example, if the conversation was done wrong, the conversation might end in the damage or ending of a relationship. It might deeply upset someone, might cause you to lose your job, or a myriad of other different consequences from the conversation. It means it's high stakes. Differing opinions is more simple. It essentially outlines that the discussion is had between two people who don't agree on something. Strong emotions is again very subjective, but for me it means that whatever is being discussed matters deeply to the person involved in the conversation. So you care about what's being discussed and you're passionate about the matter often. And if you were saying to me that you believe your friend, say for example, is not good at their job, and that's something you were saying to me, and they should try and find something else they are better at, that isn't a difficult conversation. Generally, for me, I don't know your friend or hold really any strong emotions around what you're saying. But if you're saying that directly to your friend, who of course will hold strong emotions around you saying that they're not good at their job and they should have a different job, then that's a completely different story. And so using these sort of three headlines helps you sort of define and decide whether something's going to be a difficult conversation. But ultimately, people respond differently to these types of conversations. Some people may not view anything as a difficult conversation because they're so open about things and struggle to understand how something could be difficult. Maybe they're also people that struggle with their emotions and are a bit numb to things, could just blurt things out. And this leads us to look at what are the common responses to difficult conversations, and we're going to discuss that in the next video. But I think it's important to have this definition in mind of a difficult conversation because it will help you when having conversations with other people. It'll help you decide how to have that conversation. If it does fit these three criteria, or at least some of them, then you can then think about, right, this is going to be a difficult conversation. How can I prepare for this? How can I make sure that this goes as well as it can so that some of those consequences from the high stakes are less likely to happen, although obviously you can't control everything, you can just do your best. But I think the most important part of any process of self-improvement like this, trying to improve your ability to have difficult conversation, is ultimately noticing. It's essential for any change to occur. If you can notice something that you feel needs to change, then you can try to do something about it. But if you're not reflecting on yourself, you're not reflecting on how you feel or how you're making other people feel in different situations, then you aren't going to think something needs to change. And for me, self-awareness is one of the most powerful tools in life because it's the thing that you can use to be better. Of course, then it comes the work, obviously, of changing the thing, but it all starts with noticing. And I notice my avoidance response through regularly doing reflective logs in my social work practice and looking out for areas of my practice that didn't match with how I wanted to be. And so through noticing, you really can understand more about yourself and then trying to address it to become the person that you want to be. And ultimately, that leads to happiness. If you're working and your personal life as well is all working together in the way that you want it to and how you want to be, that is the key to a happy life. I did my own genogram for my dissertation that unpicked a bit about my background, who I was and why I behaved the way I did. And so as a bit of homework for this video, for the next week or so, try to consciously think of things you want to say to somebody but are too afraid for whatever reason. Is there anything, or are you already incredibly open and capable of saying the home truths in a way that means that the relationship is still strong and you can continue to have that relationship? Of course, not simply hurtful things, and some things are left better unsaid, to be honest. I mean constructive topics or things you don't find acceptable about the way someone's treating you or treating other people. Notice your natural response to having difficult conversations, and then think about, is this something I want to change or am I happy? And the next few videos will hopefully help you in this journey. So thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Smash the like button if you found something useful in this video. I'll put some of the links to some of the research articles as part of this. And the next one will be about how we respond to having difficult conversations and if they are useful responses. Thanks very much.